Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Friday, about 6:15 a.m. And yeah, let's do Walk the Dog. Now, you might be looking at this going, wait a minute, he's not walking. What's going on here? Well, if I'm being honest, I woke up with a splitting headache and stomach ache and my body feeling sore. So it was one of those like, ugh, if I were a normal person, I'd probably take a sick day today. But I got interview today. I got work to do. I don't want to miss the Magic pre-release, and it feels a little weird to call in sick and then go to a Magic pre-release. So that's just unprofessional. So we're gonna power through it. So I woke up, took some Tylenol, took a nice shower, tried to relax a little bit, and we'll get through the day. But I'm definitely not feeling 100%. So that's why you're not getting a walk today. So, but I don't want to miss these. I promised I wouldn't. So we're gonna do this. Yeah. All right. We're gonna go through questions today since I only answered one really long question yesterday. It doesn't feel fair. So let's do questions. The first question is, what is the design principles when regards to chase traits? How do you decide which traits get a chase trait or not? Which ones get like +1s or +2s? Generally like that. So when you're first designing a set, you're first doing your paper structure for a set, the first thing you're doing is you are organizing all of your origins and your classes, and you're getting everything organized, right? So it's like, okay, so like let's say we're building set 14, you're picking out which origins are going to be your big verticals, so it's like in this case, it's like Street Demon and Exotech with the project skins, and like those are kind of your centerpieces, and you're arranging it all out. And then the second step is, you sort of design what those traits are going to be. Right. So in the case of Street Demon, it's like, okay, it's going to be the KDA kind of reprinty sort of thing with a twist. And so then you start, you've got your champions, you've got your trait, and it's like, okay, well, what are the breakpoints? And, the common ones are like 3-6, 3-5-7, 2-4-6, things like that. And so you think through the game mechanics of what that would be. So for example, with Street Demon, it's like, well, if 2 Street Demon opened up all the hexes, that's a little much, right? Like that's pretty painful. And so it probably needs to be a 3-piece to get into it at first. And sorry, when I say it's painful, it's more just like a random 2-piece activation can't give you a lot of stats. And so having all of these hexes on your screen just to give you, 20% AP isn't very satisfying. And so we make it to start with a 3-piece. So then it's a question of, okay, is it a 3-6-9? Is it a 3-5-7? And you look at the trait structure of, the champions you have. And it's like, well, if it's a 3-6, that means you can't play the next iteration until you hit, Brand and Nico, and that's a little weird, or, whatever. And so you make the decision that it's going to be like a, whatever you want to pick. Like, let's say in this case, Street Demon, it's a 3-5-7. Okay. So now that you have your trait, you're looking at this and sort of asking yourself, okay, is the chase trait acceptable here? Because our general default is that a chase trait should exist for all of them. We've seen a lot of players kind of have fun with the fact that, that you're able to chase things, and like having that +1 and that emblem is something that traditionally players like. The other thing to keep in mind is that we know right now, at least, our players like the prismatics. And so it's like, well, if this is one of our key origins, does it need a prismatic? How much would a prismatic take? And so in the case of Street Demon, it's like, well, there's 8 champions, one of which is a 5 cost. So if it's 3-5-7, it's pretty easy to play. And that means to hit the prismatic, you would need +2. Cool, let's put that in. That makes sense. And so like usually the vertical origins have it. And again, the default stance here is everything has it, right? When we were first doing the paper structure, if you looked at like marksman versus rapid fire, both marksman and rapid fire had a 6-piece because there were 5 marksmen, and so it made sense that 5 marksmen plus 1, emblem would make the 6. Easy enough, just like rapid fire. But then what happens is, so you get that all set up in the paper document, you get that all going, everyone plans out under the assumption that there's going to be all these emblems. And then what happens is you reach the playtest phase, so it gets all implemented, you start playtesting it. And the question becomes, can you actually build compositions around these? And are they functional and are they good? So in the case of marksman, what we kept running into was like, well, if you have 4 marksmen or 6 marksmen, and if you remember, marksman is this thing where it's like you gain AD, and then like 8 seconds later, you gain more AD, you actually get the value of the trait. And that's kind of what it was at its core. But it's like, in order to go 6 marksmen, what's your front line, right? Like we were really struggling to create a front line that made sense. And typically middle traits end up not being particularly powerful because they're just stepping stones to the high end, right? It's like, how many 4 rapid fire builds do you see? Well, not many, because it's mostly just a stepping stone to 6 rapid fire when you have the emblem. And so what we found is that with marksman, it was like, well, this is actually just baiting people into playing a comp that really we just aren't seeing a lot of success with, and we can't really buff the tanks to a level to that degree. So let's just stick with 4. Let's pull that out and see how that feels. And all of a sudden it was like, no, okay, now it's like getting 4 marksmen feels good. The emblem feels worse when you do that. That's the trade-off, right? Is the emblem now becomes less powerful, and so you're not able to play that, which is tricky. But it ended up being healthier, and so now we see 4 Vanguard, 4 marksmen be a thing. It's playable. You have enough front line. And especially because it was like Aphelios was a ramping champ, Jinx was a ramping champ, so it was like the marksmen themselves also had a lot of ramp built into that. So, yeah. So that's how that works. What's up? Yes, please. That was my wife checking to see if I wanted breakfast, which I would like breakfast. So, but yeah, so that's generally how it works. Is you start with the assumption that you're going to have it. See if there are compositions that are buildable around it, and if there aren't, pull it out. But the other thing we've been learning more recently is, like, if you remember, we had stuff like 8 Bastion and 8 Bruiser and stuff like that, and 8 Sorcerer in set 13. And what we're finding is that, especially with the classes, going beyond 6 tends to lead to a world where there's only one version of the comp. It's like, if there's an 8 Bruiser comp, let's say there was an 8 Bruiser comp in this set, and just for giggles here, we're going to say Nico was also a bruiser, right? It's like, well, the level 8 comp is like, well, you hit the emblem, and there'd only be that bruiser, and you'd play 8 bruiser plus either like Fiddle or Vex or something, who knows? There'd be like one comp. And when you only have 6, though, it's like all of a sudden the backline and the connecting tissue, the connecting pieces you're ready to flex actually end up being more interesting. And so generally we've actually been finding that like having larger trait structures tends to do more negative things to interesting team building. I think the best example of this on live right now is Dynamo, right? It's like there's only 4 Dynamo champions, but like what you can build around that Dynamo tends to be pretty interesting, and you can do a bunch of different things, whether it be like Braum or Bastion or whatever. And so having these smaller traits is good. But like, should there be a 5 or 6 Dynamo, even though there are 5 Dynamos in the set? Not really, because then all of a sudden you'd be balancing around 6 Dynamo, and it wouldn't be as interesting. So, yeah, interestingly enough, I've been finding that we kind of want to shift away from too many of these like really, really large ones. So it's interesting. And the reality is, like many design decisions, there's not necessarily a right answer here. If you take rapid fire, for example, it's like, is rapid fire actually good for the game at 6? Or should it have actually just been a 2-4 and 4-piece was the cap? Honestly, it would have been fine either way, Now, the challenge with 6 rapid fire is it's basically said, at this point, it's mostly just a Renekton comp, which isn't the best. But yeah, and like I said, you can go through each trait and kind of break it down. But again, the default is +1ing from an emblem is a good thing. Having some prismatics for your key origins is a good thing. And then pull back if you find out that you don't have anything. If there's no valid comp pullback, right? And again, like set 13, when we pulled back from 8 to 6 sorcerer, the game got more interesting, right? The game got better for it because you could now build more comps around that sort of max cap. So yeah, so there you go. That's kind of the design principles on that. All right, next question. If you were a full-time content creator for TFT, what would you do? I think, I've spent a lot of time looking, because it's kind of a fun hobby, of looking at the content creation space in TFT. And I definitely feel like it's one of those things that's underutilized. There aren't a lot of, well, that's not true. There are some great content creators in TFT space who have found their niche, right? LeDuck, who's like, I'm going to show you all the really interesting interactions. That's a good space. I forget the name of them, but there's those two YouTubers who I believe they do the like silly content farm where it's like, here's what happens when you hit max stacks of this, or here's every 3-star 5. Like, they do it with the pre-made lobby stuff, but it's like, here's the wild and crazy scenario that you might not normally get. We made that happen. Here's what it looks like. Here's a 4-star Mundo with triple Radiant Ormogs that we managed to pull off because we've been sitting here trying to make all these things happen. Like, those videos tend to be pretty funny as well. I've seen one of them popping up on TikTok recently that I thought was pretty good. And those are good niches. But I feel like the niche that isn't really talked about is like the almost like the basic. It's not, calling it intro is not correct, but it's like the go over the content. So for example, what I would probably do, and I toyed with this a little bit with the shorts. And I thought it was okay. I forget, it was like 8.5 I did this. But I would do this more full time. It's like, you get 60 videos if just every day you pick a champion. Like, let's say, start with the 1 cost, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do a video around Kog'Maw. And it sort of like explains what Kog'Maw is, explains his like best in slot, items he can use. And then in the background, show a game where you play Kog'Maw. And it's like, this is the Kog'Maw video. And so that way, anytime somebody wants to learn about Kog'Maw, you would have that video. And you just go through a set every day. And it's sort of like, here's that video, right? And that would be some pretty good YouTube content. I think would go over pretty well. And so, that would get through every champion. You can even do that for traits. And like I said, if you add traits, you're talking 90 videos. And that would get you through 3 months of the 4 months of the set. Then you'd go on to the next set, and that'd be good. Other things I think we can do are like top 10 lists are a pretty common one I think I would be interested in doing. Where it'd be like, top 10 1-cost carries throughout TFT's history, or, the top 10 most fun units in set 8. Because I think some of those retrospective stuff, now that we're getting to be a 6-year-old, 7-year-old game, can be a lot of fun. Gangly recently did that video where he was talking about War Week. I thought that video was received really, really well. Doing stuff like that would be really cool. Now, I think the challenge is a lot of that takes effort. And if you look at the TFT stream, most of it is players who log in and play the game, right? Like, a lot of, especially in NA, a lot of the content creators don't necessarily want to do that, like, sort of YouTube video generation, because it takes a lot of effort. But I do actually think that's where some of the big potential is. YouTube is a much bigger platform than Twitch. Twitch is great for live streaming and watching the games, but even within what I see, I started off primarily Twitch streamer, but like the returns are sort of actually equal between the two platforms right now, and I barely invest in YouTube, right? Like, it's just daily uploads, patch rundowns, but like the patch rundowns will get like pretty insane views for TFT content. So, trying to do that with like all the content, I think would be really interesting. And again, that way, if somebody, anytime, like what you'd want is if somebody goes to YouTube and they Google, Zeri TFT, right? Your video should be the first thing that pops up, and it walks through Zeri and fundamentals and how to play Zeri, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you could even do a short version where it's like, hey, you in the middle of a game and you're trying to make Zeri carry work, here's how you do it, and do like the super short version. So, I don't know. Plus, it just making videos is a lot of fun. So that's probably what I would do, is just like that stuff. I don't know that I would stream constantly, because I think streaming is actually one of the things where, Soju's the exception to this, but if you stream too much, people get tired of you. Um, and so I feel like you'd want to keep the streams to like 3 or 4 days a week tops, and then use the rest to make those videos and things like that, and record in the background and research and stuff like that. Um, that'd be my approach probably. Now, all of this is to say that's assuming if I was a full-time TFT streamer, right? We've talked about if I like retired from TFT, right? Like let's say somehow today I fall into $10 million and I go, okay, I don't need to work anymore. I'm going to retire. And I'm going to use my spare time to be a full-time content creator. What would I do? Right? We've talked about that on the walk before, where in that world, I probably become like a video game reviewer for fun. And it's just like, here's the video game that came out. Here's my review of it. That'd be kind of fun. That way you get a professional game designer's opinion on game reviews. Alternatively, there's still some, projects I want to make, the Metroidvania, a couple others. So like almost doing like an indie dev thing where it's like I make those and then make YouTube videos about them, and kind of like this, answer questions about like the process of making them and stuff like that would be pretty cool too. So I think there's a lot of angles there. But those would be the spaces I'd be interested in. So, all right. Next question. Thoughts on analog versus digital game design? Yeah. So this is an interesting question. It's a game dev question where it's like you're starting to iterate on your game, and what do you want to do? Do you want to do like analog or digital? Forgive me, I'm gonna take a drink here. And so the reality here is that digital can be quicker and definitely has more interesting results, but analog, or what we call paper, a lot of the time, is actually, I think, the better thing to do when you're first starting. Getting familiar with because paper is something you can iterate on very quickly. What I can tell you is, even at Riot, I have made entire games that were playable. Like, I can't go into it too much, but basically, using paper, you can set people up in a situation where they can play through a game, and even show that to stakeholders to kind of paint a picture of a digital product you'd want to create. And that can be done really well. And paper is the kind of thing that it's really low cost, right? You can print off nice looking stuff and then attach it to a deck of cards, or there's a lot of really creative ways you can do it. Going all the way back to when I was like 15 to 18, one of the things I did, it's silly looking back, so you have to forgive me, but this is like intro game design, was we would play Magic the Gathering, but we had a list of 200 random effects, and on your calculator you would just press random between 1 and 200, and so it was like at the start of your turn you'd have your draw phase, your upkeep phase, and then your calculator button press phase. And we had this list of 200, and these would be different effects like draw a card or whatever. And I think, hilariously enough, I might still have the list somewhere. But you would iterate, like then you'd go play the game, you'd go play some Magic with it, and you'd see one of these effects and it would happen, and you'd just be like, this is the stupidest thing, and you would iterate. And so the list actually has like some that were like crossed out and replaced, but like that's game design, right? It's like understanding like what type of effects, if you have this random effect that doesn't feel BS. And some of you are probably laughing where it's like, oh look, Mort dealing with random effects way back when he was 15. But yes, right? And it's like that's the stuff that leads to that expertise where you're like, oh no, I've played games where, if you have a random effect that says destroy all your lands, it's not very fun, right? Because that single effect has more impact than everything else in the rest of the game, and the game becomes all about those random effects. But if instead the effect is, tap one of your lands, it's like, yeah, that sucks, but like you can deal around it, and like knowing the impact of those random effects, those are learnings that you take in your game design world. So if you're just starting out, paper is definitely better. Now, all of that is to say, if you're somehow a computer whiz, right? Like if you're, God, I sound like a boomer. Computer whiz, those whiz kids. If you're somebody who can iterate quickly on the computer as well, cool, great, do it, right? Like there are definitely a lot of tools out there now, and it can be done to the same thing. But only if you're like exceptionally good at that kind of stuff. You have to be really fast. One of our designers on our team, Milo, he was really good at doing like Minecraft mods, and he did a lot in the Minecraft mod space. So, that's a place where he iterated on some of his game design as well. But yeah, board games, card games, cards, things like that are definitely an easy space to get some of those game design lessons. So, if you can, I recommend paper as much as you can. All right. How do we approach and value themes? This person was mentioning how they like the fantasy themes and, aren't as much into the like sci-fi cyberpunk stuff. So it's like, well, how do we approach that? Generally, there's sort of this, okay, like imagine if you will, we know what TFT is, right? TFT is a game that uses League of Legends skins to create an auto battler. So it's not like we're going to be able to make brand new themes that League of Legends skins don't have, right? So essentially, we are starting with a constraint, and that constraint is the available League of Legends skins. Like that's the limitation here. Under that constraint, you sort of bucket it into what are all the possible themes you could do, right? And so it's like, we'll start with popular skin lines. Okay, Star Guardian, that's a popular skin line. What kind of sets can we build with that? Well, we could do a space one called Galaxies. Okay, cool. Is there another one we could do with that? Yeah, maybe there's this like monsters attack one, and we use monsters, and the Star Guardians are fighting the monsters. Okay, cool. Are there others? Yeah, absolutely, right? And so imagine, if you will, you take the time to like write down all the different like buckets of themes that you could make out of League of Legends skins. Okay. Then from there, it's about giving players a, varied experience, right? So imagine if we did that same exercise, and then we're like, okay, our first set is going to be the Star Guardian Galaxies one. And then our second set is going to be the Star Guardian Monsters Attack one. And then our third set is going to be the Star Guardian Cooking one. And then our fourth set is going to be the you get the idea. And it's like, people are going to get tired of Star Guardian. They're going to get like super tired of it. They're going to be like, I want something else. I need some variety. I'm tired of all the sci-fi Star Guardian anime, whatever you want to call it. Give me something else. And so what that means is when you're outlining your plan for like all these different sets, you want to have variety, right? And so like an overly simple version of this is like, we're going to go sci-fi and then fantasy and then Runeterra, and then sci-fi, and then fantasy, and then Runeterra, right? Like that would be the most simple, boring version of that. But that would at least work, right? It would create that variety that keeps players interested. And so when outlining those themes, you want to make sure you're giving that variety. So that's a big thing for us, is just making sure that as you go from set to set, there's some interesting variety for folks. Now, we definitely know that like certain regions prefer certain types and things like that. For example, I think if you look at something like Fates or Inkborn Fables, it wouldn't surprise you to hear that like those are generally preferred by our eastern regions. Shocking. Whereas something like Monsters Attack, generally preferred a little bit more in like European regions. And so every region's going to have their like slight preferences. But that doesn't mean you need one or the other more, right? Like we're not trying to appeal to any particular region more than another. It's just generally variety, right? And you just sort of accept that like, oh, okay, well now it's time to do, we're about to do an anime fighting one, as you know, from the roadmap. And it's like, okay, time to do that. But after that, we're probably not doing another anime one for, a couple sets, because we need a break from that. That's why like, after Into the Arcane, we're not doing a base Runeterra set. Too similar. So again, it's just creating the buckets of themes you're excited about, having nice variety, tonal shifts as you switch from set to set. That's generally the gist of it. So, and yeah, again, players are definitely going to have their preferences of which ones they're like. Some players loved Remix Rumble, some players did not. Some players love Cyber City, some players do not. you know, that's just the way it goes. All right, and last question today. I did get through all five. What can you explain like the limitations on new skins and new champions for TFT? Because stuff like Kobuko and the Arcane champions were pretty cool, but it's not like we're ever going to see a set of like all TFT uniques, right? Generally, the way to look at it is anything new is expensive, right? Like making a brand new character is expensive. It has to be something interesting and resonant and takes a lot of research. And if you put something like Kobuko in a set, you are trading off against a champion that someone may love, right? Like for every Kobuko in a set, that means no Rammus, which, is a great thing. But, the value and reasoning has to be there for why you're putting these new things in a set, right? And so like with Arcane, it was sort of pretty clear. It's like, let's get more characters from Arcane. Makes sense. With Kobuko, there was a very clear need, which is one of the things we keep running into is Poppy ends up having to be a one cost because we don't have a lot of Yordle tanks. It's like Poppy, a Mumu who has very little skins, Rumble who has very little skins, and then that's about it. There just aren't a lot of Yordle tanks, and so we were like, ooh, we could really use a Yordle tank. That'd be nice. But there really has to be a good justification for making it because it will be a lot of resources, right? Especially on our art team. Our art team is like asking them to make a brand new champion, brand new model, brand new animations. That is a big lift compared to we're taking Yone and putting him in. Woo! Right? Like that's way less expensive. And if we do more of the Yone stuff, the art team can focus on things like carousel art or VFX or whatever, like stuff that helps elevate the set that isn't just making brand new characters. So the limitation here is really just about it needs to make sense. It needs to have a clear purpose so that we're getting that expected value trade-off, right? Like if someone came to me and was like, hey, I want to make a brand new archer character that shoots bows, arrows really quick, we'd be like, Ash, Vayne, like, what? No. Right? But saying, hey, I really need a Yordle tank because I'm tired of Poppy being a one cost in every single set is like, yeah, okay, I get it. And players love Yordles. Players really like cute looking things like Yordle. So having something extra there is pretty important. We should make that. Or in the case of Sohm, where it was like, we chipped Dragonlands, and it was like, well, we made dragons, but we got desperate, and so we had to have 3 Shyvanas, 4 Gallios, and 3 Aurelian Souls, which wasn't great. So, man, it would be a big lift if we could just have our own dragon. And the art team's like, yeah, we agree. Let us make our own dragon. And you get Sohm, which is like great. So stuff like that can be good. Or, Silco for Arcane. Like, all of these are, again, very clear purposes. And so, again, moving forward, and like what I can tell you is, for example, in a future set, we actually had some ideas where we're like, hey, let's make these never existing things before. And then as we went further along development, it was like, well, we don't really need these. You should be switching these with these. So actually, we're not going to make as many of these as you want, or even any or whatever, right? And it's like, those are the trade-offs, right? Because yes, it's a cool idea to make something new, but again, it's very costly. There's only so many resources in a day, and it's like, well, are you willing to give up this and this and this so that you can make that new champion? Probably not. Probably not. The set's probably worse if you give all that up. So, yeah. So, there you go. There we go. Powered through a bunch of questions. All right. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I can't tell if I'm actually sick or just like not feeling well or tired or what, but I at least got through this. So I'm going to go have breakfast, and I'm going to go try to get through today. I hope the Tylenol kicks in. Because again, I got to get through the day. I do want to do the Magic pre-release. I'm really excited for that. It'll be fun. And then stream tomorrow. Stream might start a little late if you're watching this. Because if I go to the Magic pre-release, I have no idea when it's going to end. But it's certainly going to end way later than I would normally go to bed before getting ready for stream. So stream might be a little late, but should be fine. And yeah. Okay. Wish me luck to get through the day. Hopefully you have a great day. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday resuming these videos. And yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.